Easy.
And welcome into the Rundown on Fox Sports Radio 1400. Around the world on the iHeartRadio app. My name is Rob Sanders. Happy to be back with you as we start the new year. Ha, ha, ha. A few times when people said, hey, we'll see you next year last week, I wanted to throw something at them. But somebody I would not throw something at is my guest this afternoon, the first guest of the year from the ACC Digital Network. Wes Bryant joins us. Wes, what's going on, my friend? How are you?
What's going on, my man? I'm licking my chops right now, man. Tough bowl season for the ACC. 0-6, tough.
Yeah, well, that's kind of what I wanted to start with you on. Is the ACC that bad, or is it just an issue of you could look at so many different things that could be the cause of it? Bad matchups, COVID-19, opt-outs. Is the ACC really that bad, or was it just a combination of things?
Well, I mean, the ACC, the last couple of seasons, we've been struggling in bowl games outside of Clemson and maybe a couple other teams. Bottom line, the ACC just, we have to get that depth back in the middle of the league. And we can't just be top heavy and just have a Clemson and maybe one other team like a Notre Dame or somebody like that can come in and save us and get victories. We have to get better as a league. And, the talent's there. The ACC second most drafted league behind the SEC. So the talent isn't the problem. It's just for whatever reason in the bowl season, we can't get victories. And that's something that's got to change. And there's no other excuse but except that it's got to change. You look at NC State losing to a 4-win Kentucky team. Just some of the losses, just tough. Clemson going in and getting manhandled the way they did. So just plain and simple, the ACC has got to be better. There's no other rationale besides that.
Well, but when you really stop and look at it, some of the losses you kind of scratch your head with. I not to pick at the Demon Deacons a bit here, but I thought they were better than Wisconsin. But Sam Hartman throws 4 interceptions. He threw 1 going into that game, but then kind of the wheels just came off a little bit in that matchup at the up there in Charlotte.
Yeah, some teams you end the season different ways, and Wake Forest wasn't coming into this game in the best of conditions, losing to Louisville the way they did, and just didn't have a lot of momentum, and they came into the game, started off strong, you go up 14-0, and then Sam Hartman just inexplicably staring down receivers, gets intercepted pretty much 3 straight times on the same type of route, throwing in the middle of the football field, just inexplicable behavior from the Demon Deacons. And when you play a team against Wisconsin, they're not going to beat themselves. They're always going to be the team that's going to be on the positive side of the turnover margin. And Wake was the same way coming in. You thought both of these teams would take care of the football. But Wake played right into Wisconsin's hands, and they capitalized on it. And a lot of those turnovers resulted in short fields for Wisconsin because offensively they weren't anything that would scare anybody. But when you're playing, from the plus 30, the plus 40, plus 20, then, hey, you're going to be able to put some points on the board. And that's what happened to Wake. And I just, it's just hard to put into words that performance that they had.
All right, well, let's look at the 2 top teams in the ACC with Notre Dame playing Alabama. The more and more you watch Alabama, the more and more you like. I think that was just I think Alabama's just good is basically the easy way to look at it. A tough matchup there for the Irish.
Oh, for sure. I mean, the game went about how we did, even though, not to get into gambling spreads or whatnot, but not Wake Forest, but Notre Dame, they did compete, but they still lost by a convincing margin, and it was nothing that nobody did not expect. But for Notre Dame, you just want to see them when they get on this stage, whether they're in the ACC or not. You want to see them compete and get to where they can be within a touchdown of these teams late or have chances to win late. And they're just getting in these games and just really taking sound beatings. And it's starting to get to a point where fans are really starting to tire of seeing them get on this stage if they can't perform better than what they have.
Well, we could that's a conversation for another day. But then you have the Clemson matchup with Ohio State. I've been on the camp that I didn't think Ohio State belonged. Ohio State made me look stupid. I have no problem coming on the radio and saying that. They definitely looked the part the other night. And if you watch that game in the trenches, they just beat the snot out of Clemson in the trenches. One of the first times that I can say that in a while, that it just looked like Clemson just didn't match up front.
Well, we saw that a few weeks earlier when they played Notre Dame in South Bend. Notre Dame completely dominated that game up front. And the thing was with Clemson, as much as I wanted to put them, because if you remember, Rob, when we talked preseason, I did say I thought Ohio State was going to win the national championship. Now, when they played, some of those big games, it made me waver just a little bit. But Clemson, bottom line, as much as I wanted them to get it for Trevor's last season, they kind of got a lot of the flaws exposed that I had seen during the season as far as just their depth. I think a lot of these things I've echoed on this show, but just their depth at wide receiver, I wasn't a huge fan of. You had E.J. Williams, really their third receiver, but, he's still a true freshman. But you didn't have that T. Higgins, Justin Ross freakish combo with Amari Rodgers and guys like Cornell Powell being the third and fourth guys. You had those two as your main guys, and then not a lot of depth behind them as far as just playmakers that Trevor Lawrence could count on. Offensive line all season, they had a tough time running the football as far as, Travis Etienne, we expected him to really have a season for the ages. And a lot of that was because of the push up front just wasn't what it's been in the past. Then you look at defensively, the defensive line. Yes, they got a couple of can't miss guys up there with Brian Brescia and Miles Murphy, but you sometimes get, something good from KJ Henry. He had a solid year, but he's a rotational piece. Tyler Davis was good, but he was hurt a lot of the season. But a lot of that defensive line is still puppies. And when they go up against experienced offensive lines, I don't care how good they are. When you're true freshmen, you're going to have some days where you get taken to school by bigger, more experienced linemen. We know the linebackers were an issue kind of all year. Then Mike Davis was hurt on and off. Skalski was hurt on and off. And then the depth behind them wasn't there. I thought the secondary was probably the strongest part of that defense for most of the season. But Nolan Turner, you saw how that looked in the first half with him missing. Zanders was hurt for a good part of portions of the season. So I just think Clemson just wasn't the powerhouse that we've seen. And you really have to harken back to those old teams and really appreciate that they had one of the best defensive lines college football's ever seen. They had plenty of depth all over the field and plenty of weapons. And this team just did not have it. And going up against a determined Ohio State team that had many factors that played into their performance, it just did not end up in a good day for the Tigers.
All right, well, let's talk about the rest of the bowl season for a minute. And what I want to get into is something that Coach Mack Brown said to David Hale. And I'm going to read you the quote and get your comment on it. He says, "This is totally different than what anybody has ever dealt with. I think the number one thing we need to look at is expansion of the playoff. Not one playoff player opted out. Why guys aren't opting out of the playoff, but they opt out of the top bowl games, I don't know. It's all about getting hurt, and you can sure get hurt in the playoff. If we expand it, it will help some of the other bowls." Do you agree with the head man up there at North Carolina who has seen a lot more football than you and I have?
Yeah, I do agree with him on that as well. And I think, too, man, it's just starting to be a growing trend in the generation of these players. I mean, you have people around them, all they think about is money, all they think about is the NFL. And these guys just think if they step out on the field in a bowl game, that there's something's going to happen and they're going to suffer some catastrophic injury, when history has shown there have been few and far between players that have been hurt and really decimated their draft status because of playing in a bowl game. And a lot of these guys that are doing it, they would help themselves if they went and had a great bowl game like the North Carolina players. I felt like that was a game where they could have really showcased their skills and up their draft stock that much more. But you have a lot of people around these guys, not the right support systems. You have parents and friends and agents telling these guys, pumping their head up with all this stuff. And I think that plays a large part in it, in addition to what Mack Brown said as well. So that I think that all plays into it. I don't like the trend at all. I think if you sign up for it, you should finish it. Now, these guys don't owe the fans a thing, but I do think they owe their teammates, and I think they owe themselves the opportunity to play on these grand stages.
Well, do you expand to 8, or do you expand even bigger than that? Do you go to the FCS model where you have 32 teams make the playoffs? What do you think of that?
I think if you have 32 teams make the playoffs, that will really water down the regular season, and that's one of the things we love about college football is that every game is life or death. I think that either I've heard echoes of going back to the old system, like the BCS with 2 teams, or I've heard of going back, or going to. I think the 18 model would be the best because you do want to place a premium on being a playoff team. You don't want it to just be, well, hey, everybody's going to get in. You could be a 4-loss team or 5-loss team. If you're sitting there hanging in at 25, you're going to get in. I don't want to see that. I want to see the best of the best on the stage. I'm okay with 8 going, but to me, that's where it should stop. Maybe a 16, maybe. But I still want the intensity and the sense of urgency on the regular season that college football has that makes it so unique. And I want to see, like I said, just a premium. I want to see the best of the best teams. I don't want to see teams that are in there and that I know are going to get creamed, on a given Saturday or whatever days they play.
It's going to be interesting to see how that works out. Are they going to have the opportunity there to maybe expand it? We'll have to see how that works, man. It's going to be interesting to say the least. But Coach Brown, you got to respect what he's saying here, and with everybody opting out and not wanting to get hurt, I think when this is going to get really interesting is when a playoff team, a player from a playoff team decides, hey, you know what, it's not really worth it, and they move on.
Yeah, I mean, you never want to say never. I think we'd be hard pressed to see that day come. Just because so much is at stake, so much work goes into making to the playoffs, et cetera, et cetera. But I don't know. I mean, it would take a guy with a lot of gall to opt out of playing in the playoffs.
Yeah, I completely agree with you on that. And I wonder if the peer pressure is there too, just in the regular bowl. And I think the one thing in the bowl season that bothered me the most, there was actually 2. The Oklahoma State wide receiver that played the first half, but said nah during the second half. And then Kyle Pitts giving his team a pump them up message that ESPN aired. That just basically says, hey, it's okay to opt out. I mean, that really bothered me.
Yeah, I agree with you 100%. I mean, I don't like it. I mean, I'm 37 years old. I don't consider myself an old guy, but I definitely, I'm very much, about football character. Not saying these guys don't have any, but come on, man. Like I said, you step out there with your teammates and you decide to play, and you sign up to play the season, then you need to play the season, everything that is entailed in that season. So it really drives me up the wall as well. I mean, I'll be frank, I didn't like a lot of the guys, going into training camps with their teams and then deciding they weren't going to play the season. I wasn't a fan of that either. I feel like once you make the decision, what's at stake. The coronavirus hasn't gone anywhere. You're well informed by the time you put the pads on to go to camp and once you get in it. So unless your whole team has a outbreak of it, I think that once you decide, hey, I'm going to rock with my team and we're going to go out and play the season, you need to do it all the way to the end. And I think that in the non-COVID era as well, if you're going to play in the games, then play in all of the games or don't play at all. And that's how I would feel if I was a teammate or a coach or anything. Like, don't come with us and then decide at the last minute, I don't want to play because I don't want to get hurt. I mean, really, when's the last guy that we've seen suffer a catastrophic injury and it really affect them? And even with, you point back to Willis McGahee in a championship game, he still went in the first round. So there have been guys like the kid, I forget what it was, the cornerback from Washington. There have been guys getting hurt preparing for the draft that have torn Achilles, that have torn ACLs. So we have cases on both sides of the fence here that you can injure yourself preparing for the draft. So I don't like it. I'm with you 100%, and I'm not a fan of it at all.
Wes Bryant from the ACC Digital Network joining us this afternoon. Hey, Wes, man, it's been great having you on during the football season. We're going to talk hoops later on, too. But thanks for joining us today here on The Rundown, man. I really appreciate it.
Not a problem. You know where to find me when you need me, man.
Absolutely. Of course, they can find you on Twitter and Instagram at Wes Got Range, right?
Wes Got Range, and on Instagram, Wes Got Range 704.
All right, man. Thanks for joining us on The Rundown, buddy. Appreciate it.
All right, man.
All right, there you go. Of course, Wes Bryant breaking down some of the bowl situations with the ACC. One of the big stories today, though, I wanted to lead off the program with Will Muschamp has turned down according to Dennis Dodd from CBS Sports, he turned down the defensive coordinator position at the University of Texas. Apparently, he didn't want to go work for Steve Sarkisian, or maybe it's an issue of, I mean, I hate to throw this out there, but it's money. Maybe it's, hey, I'm going to make, $2 million as the Texas defensive coordinator. But I don't know if that would work against what he gets paid as far as his buyout from South Carolina. Either way, it's a mess. This guy could have had the defensive coordinator job at the University of Texas, and he turned it down. Now, of course, remember, Muschamp had that job under Coach Mack Brown, who we talked a little bit about earlier. So with that, he was supposed to be like the head coach in waiting, and that never came to fruition. He, of course, eventually ended up as the head coach at Florida and, basically ran the Florida program into the ground. I know people get mad when I say that, but look at what he left the program at. And then, of course, comes to South Carolina, and South Carolina's had to hit the reset button as well. Here's my thing, though. When you look at the South Carolina defense, and I know that he, quote unquote, wasn't the defensive coordinator, but let's be honest, he was the defensive coordinator. And the South Carolina defense was absolutely not very good under Will Muschamp. They weren't very good. How can you possibly want to hire this guy as your defensive coordinator? In my opinion, he's untouchable for a while. Just by the way that the last two head coaching jobs he's had. Yeah, I mean, he should have the capability to go and work somewhere. I get it. But we're talking about Texas here. One of the richest as far as financial programs in the country. And you're telling me they want to spend some of that money to get Will Muschamp as their head coach? Not buying that. Not buying that at all. If I'm a fan of Texas, I'm not buying that. Maybe there's the mentality of if he just runs the defense, he'll be fine. But then again, I don't know. So we'll take calls on that this afternoon. 803-978-1832. 803-978-1832 is the number to call if you would like to join us here on the Rundown to talk about that. Also, what Coach Mack Brown said. Mack Brown said, hey, we need to have the college football playoffs set up where there's more people in it. And then that will encourage more players to not opt out. Here's something that we could do. Let's just have most of these bowl games go away. And I know that I sound like I'm the big old man here, but I remember as a kid, when a team went to a bowl game, it was a big deal. Now, not so much. There's just so many of them. It, my friends, is a mess. 803-978-1832, 803-978-1832. If you want to join us here on the Rundown this afternoon, we can talk about Will Muschamp. And, of course, you can find the full story up on my blog page at foxsportsradio1400.com. But there's also a report of who they're going after since they can't have Muschamp. We'll tell you who that is. We'll also talk a little bit about, I have my list this afternoon of my top 5 players that did not win the Heisman Trophy. So we'll have that for you and a lot more in just a moment. You're listening to The Rundown. This is Fox Sports Radio 1400. Hey, I appreciate you guys hanging out with me over there. I had to have my guest first, and I couldn't just lead off with that. And that story dropped not too long ago. So I'm sorry you had to do that and sit through even my guest was great, but I know that story's big to you Gamecock fans, and just the way that the thing's set up as far as the way that I put the show together today. Blake, I understand what you're saying about they're good for family vacations, but they're bad on the front of they just stink. All of the games stink, man. I mean, what bowl game did you watch this year that was kind of like, hey, I'm kind of into it? I don't know, man. Feeling a little tough on that one. Shout out to Nate over there. Appreciate you, brother. Also, 41-35. I think it's going to be a shootout. I agree on the Alabama-Ohio State game. Take the over if you're one of those folks that likes to bet. We can't bet in South Carolina because Governor McMaster thinks that we're too stupid to bet, but, man's done some cool stuff as our governor, but yeah, we're too stupid to bet. I could see the CCU Liberty game. Those two teams looked like they really wanted to play. That was CCU's first bowl appearance, so they were jacked for that. But, you hate both teams in the Natty. That's funny, man. That's absolutely funny. But what do you guys think about Muschamp, man? You think he's just, it's just sad, is the way I look at it. Sad. Just go coaches. Go coach, man. But then again, I don't know if I would hire him. Would you want Will Muschamp as your head coach? Not your head coach, your defensive coordinator. Yeah, his kids aren't going to have to worry about money. If he invested correctly, his kids aren't going to have to worry about money. You're right about that, Milton. I'll highlight that comment. That's so far the comment of the day. Appreciate that, buddy. And welcome back into the rundown on Fox Sports Radio 1400 around the world on the iHeart Radio app. The big news today, Will Muschamp, the former South Carolina head coach, has turned down the job as the defensive coordinator for Texas. According to Dennis Dodd, you can find the full story up on my blog page at foxsportsradio1400.com. And Blake asked a great question online. So he turns down a good paying job that wipes out a lot of the money owed. I think there's like a set amount, and I've got to get someone on that understands a lot of these contracts, but I think there's like a set amount that he can make that will not affect his buyout, which is why you see a lot of teams like they'll hire guys as analysts. Like Nick Saban is big on that. That's why he's got Butch Jones and all these other guys that are on his team, that it's like the island of misfit coaches. And a lot of times they'll go there and be an analyst and get paid like $40,000 a year. Ta-da, they're still technically a coach, but they're not like making coaches money because they're still on the backs of the programs that they left behind, that they absolutely destroyed. So with that, that's kind of what happened here. Anyway, so Texas fires Tom Herman and immediately hires Steve Sarkisian. And then the other name that is on the list for their defensive coordinator is they're going to go to Arkansas and get Barry Odom, who, of course, wasn't very good at Mizzou. And then he ends up at Arkansas. They play pretty decent defense down there at Arkansas this year. Now he's going to end up, he's on the short list, according to what several reports say, as the defensive coordinator for Steve Sarkisian at Texas, which, you know, I was texting back and forth with my good buddy, former Gamecock assistant Eric Wilson. We were actually going back and forth on Twitter about it. I don't know what some of these programs want. You know, Gus Malzahn was 34 games over 500? Fired. Get out. Tom Herman was 14 games over 500? 32 and 18, I think it was, at Texas. Get out. That's not good enough. I have to break this down for folks. There are only 4 college football playoff berths that are out there every season. So you're only going to have 4 teams as of right now that are going to make the college football playoff. You're only going to have 1 national champion. Okay? You can't expect to contend for just that. And if you don't get there, that's not good enough. You can make the argument that, hey, they didn't win conferences. I can buy that. They didn't win the division. I can buy that. And maybe they were just sick of Tom Herman. I can buy that as well. So, but I still don't understand the Malzahn hire. They're firing Malzahn. Malzahn's going to sit back and collect that Auburn money, and he's going to make sure his grandkids have money on top of that, and then go coach somewhere else, and he'll probably do a good job. He's leaving that program, in my opinion, somewhat better than what he found it. I mean, Auburn is not a complete gong show. A team that can go up in there can actually, a new coach can go in there, and probably the coach they hired from Boise State. Is anybody out there willing to say, hey, they're not going to win 7 or 8 games next year? I'm not. I'm truly not. Milton says online, of course, you can follow us online. Find us today on YouTube at Carolina Jackpot. Milton says, where do you think Tom Herman will go to next? You know, I don't think that he's had his last head coaching job. And what I mean by that is I think he'll end up somewhere else. He may end up at a smaller school, or he may just take some time off. Just saying. It's not that far-fetched to think, hey, this guy's going to do his thing at somewhere else. Maybe he needs to go somewhere where it's, at Texas, everything is Texas football. Maybe he needs to go somewhere that, I hate to use Mizzou as an example, but Mizzou. Not that they're going to hire him, but a program that's on the level of Mizzou, where if he goes in and wins 8 games, 9 games, they're going to look at him like he's the absolute best thing since sliced bread. Maybe that's what's going to happen with Tom Herman, but I look for him to go to a job like that. And it wouldn't surprise me if it ends up being a Power 5 job. Out to the phones we go. And good afternoon. Welcome to the Rundown. Hello, what's up, buddy?
I don't see how people still taking Trevor Lawrence first round. Our first pick over Justin Fields the way that Trevor played Saturday night.
So you're basing Trevor Lawrence's one game, and that's his entire. You're not looking at the rest of what he's done in his college football career. You're basing it on the one matchup that he had with Justin Fields, and you think Justin Fields is so much better. Is that where you're going?
Fields showed on the big stage and everything that it had that Justin Fields is number one and Trevor Lawrence number 2.
I think Jacksonville is going to take Trevor Lawrence at number 1. Lawrence didn't show up well. He did throw for more yards than Fields did the other night. He threw for more yards than Fields, but I also know that Trevor Lawrence has shown out on the big stage. And I think that people seem to forget he lit up Alabama. The Clemson offense had 44 points that night. They seem to forget that when he was a true freshman. I don't think you can just throw out Trevor Lawrence and say, oh, he's a bum because he had one bad game in the against Justin Fields.
Yeah, I see what you're saying about that.
Yeah. All right, man. Hey, I appreciate you calling and joining us on the Rundown this afternoon. Thanks so much.
All right, thank you.
All right. We can talk about that too. Did Trevor Lawrence's performance in the college football playoff lower your opinion of him? I don't think so. I think he's going to go to the NFL. The Jacksonville Jaguars are jumping at the bit, I think, to take him. And I think he's going to be a great quarterback in the NFL. So I don't think that you can judge him just by that one matchup against Ohio State. Just like you can't judge him for the one matchup that he had with Alabama either, where he played really well there. He also did well against Notre Dame, which a lot of folks are thinking Notre Dame is not quite what they should have been in the playoff. But I don't think that you throw the baby out with the bathwater, as they would say, and think that Trevor Lawrence is going to be behind Justin Fields. People seem to forget that, like gentlemen like that, because I've seen that in my Twitter feed, by the way. Oh, I would take Justin Fields over Trevor Lawrence. They don't remember he threw for, as far as Fields go, he threw for 115 yards against Northwestern, a couple of interceptions. Can't judge Fields just on that either. Now, on the other hand, Justin Fields looked like a Heisman Trophy winner the other night. And not taking anything away from him, he lit that Venables defense up like a Christmas tree. And the last 2 college football playoffs, the Brent Venables defense has been terrible. Now, you could argue they played against quarterbacks that are absolutely outstanding, against receivers and running backs that are absolutely outstanding, that would light up just about anybody else. Look, what made the Brent Venables defenses better than everyone else was the fact that when they matched up against defenses like Alabama, yeah, they would get stops. And you look back at the defensive lines that Clemson has had: Dexter Lawrence, Cleveland Farrell, Christian Wilkins, all of these guys. You lose those guys, and there's a drop-off. Not saying that Clemson can't rebound from it, but the reality is that when you have that much talent go away, the defense ends up having, I think, coming up on the short end of the stick there. 803-978-1832, 803-978-1832 is the number to call if you'd like to join us here on the Rundown this afternoon, here on Fox Sports Radio 1400. We'll have the list when we come back. Yeah, that's going to be some good stuff there. My top 5 players that should have won the Heisman, but they didn't. More of the Rundown in just a moment on Fox Sports Radio 1400. I don't think they're going to draft Fields. I think it's going to be Trevor Lawrence. And if they don't draft him, I still think wherever Trevor Lawrence goes, he's going to be good. Lawrence will end up with the better NFL career. You're probably right. And it's nothing against Fields. Fields is a good player. I just think that Lawrence he's just a big, big guy that can throw the ball wherever he wants. All right, here we go, guys. And welcome back into the Rundown. I am Rob Sanders. You know, we were talking a little bit about the Heisman Trophy. That's going to be announced next week. I thought I would put together something today. This is my list, which is the top 5 players, in my opinion, that didn't win the Heisman.
Strap in. It's time for the list.
You know, the list this afternoon, we'll start with my 5 players that should have won the Heisman, but they just didn't. So we'll get into that. We'll go with right here at number 5.
Number 5.
Adrian Peterson. Of course, he was the running back at Oklahoma. If you look at his stats, man, this guy absolutely shined for Oklahoma. As a freshman in 2004, ran for 1,925 yards and 15 touchdowns, finishing second in the Heisman race to Southern Cal's Matt Leinart. And I tell you what, man, it's a shame that he did not win the Heisman. He definitely was deserving.
Number 5.
As I said, number 5, it should be number 4. Number 4 on the list is Tua Tagovailoa from Alabama. He was one of the most efficient passers in college football history. Lost the Heisman down the stretch as a sophomore when Kyler Murray kind of set the world on fire, but definitely 33 touchdowns, 3 interceptions. Just an outstanding player that you would think should have won the Heisman, but he didn't.
Number 3.
Number 3 on the list, and I stand by this because I think that he was one that's often overlooked. Peyton Manning didn't win the Heisman at Tennessee. And when you stop and think about it, how does that happen? This guy basically rewrote the record book at Tennessee. Consensus All-American, SEC Player of the Year in 97, threw for 3,819 yards, 36 touchdowns, but that's not good enough as it goes to Charles Woodson.
Number 2.
Number 2 to me is Deshaun Watson from Clemson. And, Watson, it seemed like he had 2 great years where he should have been right there in the mix. What was it? Let's see here. What were the numbers that kind of stuck in my head a little bit? After throwing 405 yards and 4 touchdowns, rushed for another 73 yards in 2015, 5,214 yards of total offense that year, 47 touchdowns, and was completely unstoppable as far as running the ball. Deshaun Watson should have a Heisman Trophy, but he doesn't. And number one, man, is one I've been talking about for a long, long time, and that is Ndamukong Suh. And I know people are like, but it's an offensive player award, Rob. Yeah, but Ndamukong Suh was, in my opinion, one of the biggest, nastiest players ever. Probably the most dominant defensive player in the 21st century, in my opinion. 2009, his senior year, I think that voters were just like, yeah, we're not going to put that guy in here. It's just not going to happen. He had, what was it? He ended up with 12 sacks, 20 and a half tackles for a loss in his final season. Now, if you watch any of those games, he was doubled and triple teamed pretty much every time and still managed up the 12 sacks and the 20 and a half tackles for loss. Yeah. Ndamukong Suh should have had an opportunity to take home that Heisman Trophy. Now, some other guys that just barely missed the list, and I hate to say it when I look at some of these guys. Andrew Luck at Stanford. Yes, he was a runner-up to Cam Newton in 2010. I know Cam Newton was an absolutely great player in his 1 year at Auburn, but it baffles me that this guy who throughout his career threw 69 touchdown passes, completion percentage above 70 over his final 2 seasons at Stanford, and he doesn't have a Heisman Trophy. That, my friends, is very, very sad. And there's one other guy that I looked at. Oh, Michael Vick. He was the first guy that was, I guess, that could be the big dual threat option that kind of came on and could really, really make plays with his feet, in my opinion. And this guy finished behind Ron Dane and Georgia Tech's Joe Hamilton. There's a name, unless you're a Clemson fan, you don't want to hear about that, because Hamilton lit Clemson up like a Christmas tree every time he played them. But Vic was just outstanding. Who can forget that Sugar Bowl? That's one that they're still talking about up in Blacksburg. So there you go. There's today's list. We try to do a list every day, but I was inspired by the Heisman and the way the Heisman has become hey, we're just going to give it to whatever running back or quarterback that we think is the absolute best. If they don't give it to Smith this year, they should burn the Heisman Trust to the ground. Seriously. And I know Clemson fans are like, yes, Trevor Lawrence deserves the Heisman. It's not a career award, though. Okay, you could add that maybe Trevor Lawrence should have been in that mix earlier on, and I don't have a problem with that. But on the other end of it, though, for this season, Devontae Smith has been outstanding and should have be able to take that Heisman Trophy home with him. You can make an argument for Mac Jones, but and even Trevor Lawrence, but in my opinion, it should go to Devontae Smith. So we'll see if that's the way that it goes this year. I don't know. I do know that I think I did post this on my blog page earlier at foxsportsradio1400.com. They've already released the Heisman odds, and Clemson, their projected quarterback for next season, DJ Uiagalelei, is already at number 2 as far as the betting favorite there. So, yeah, I remember looking at that earlier, and they're big time up on that as far as out in Las Vegas. All right, we'll take your calls at 803-978-1832, 803-978-1832. Do you have a Heisman player that didn't win the Heisman that you think should have? We'll take those calls this afternoon. We'll also take some calls about the comments that Coach Mac Brown said about expanding the playoff due to the opt-out. Do you think the opt-out has ruined the bowl season? I'm pretty much buying into that. 803-978-1832, 803-978-1832. Will Muschamp turned down the job at Texas as far as being their defensive coordinator. Do you think that you'd want Will Muschamp as your defensive coordinator? Just saying. The defenses that South Carolina had the past couple of seasons, not very good. But you want to know the crazy thing, though? A lot of those guys are going to get drafted. Mukwamu, J.C. Horn, they'll all get drafted, and it'll be, oh, well, that guy was developed by Muschamp. They may be great as far as the individual side of it, but to me, it's about having the ability to put together a good defense overall. And let's be honest, the last good defense that Will Muschamp had, I mean, he had good defense at Florida, but as far as being the defensive coordinator, was back in his Texas days. That Auburn defense where he was there for a year, not so much. Quick break. When we come back, we'll get into that and a couple of little things here on the rundown. You're listening to Fox Sports Radio 1400. You're right about the Heisman is just about stats. I'll give you that. Nate likes the fact Ndamukong Suh, man. I think you said you were a Nebraska fan earlier. Ndamukong Suh was an absolute beast. Absolute 100% beast. I mean, I got nothing else to say on that, man. The guy was just outstanding. Should have a Heisman Trophy. Eight 803-978-1832 if you guys want to chat with us today here on the show. Eight 803-978-1832. Yeah, I mean, you can, I don't know, man. Ndamukong Suh was outstanding. All right, hold on. Yeah, Vic was stupid good. Stupid good. Welcome back to the Rundown on Fox Sports Radio 1400. Out to the phones we go. Nate joins us. Nate, welcome into the program. How are you, buddy?
Pretty good. How are you?
Good. What you got for the show today?
I was just going to talk about. How if Michigan. I know I forgot to mention I'm a Michigan and Nebraska fan, so I'm half divided.
Got two teams. Okay. All right. Have at it, man.
Yeah. So what do you think about, like, do you think Jim Harbaugh could go to the NFL, or would you? I forgot if he signed already, but what are your thoughts about on Jim Harbaugh right now? Did he sign on Michigan right now, or did he? So that's what I'm trying to ask.
Yeah, buddy. All right. Well, I'll tell you what, man. I appreciate you calling, but I'll give you my thoughts on Harbaugh in just a second. But yeah, man, thanks for calling the show.
Yep.
All right, here we go. We got one more call we'll get into really quick. Good afternoon. Welcome to the Rundown.
Hey, boss. How's it going?
What's going on, friend? How are you?
I'm all right. First of all, Muschamp just needs to realize he's not a good head coach. Now, I do think he's a good defensive coordinator.
Sure.
And Jim McElwain can't but agree. He won 2 SEC East titles with Muschamp's defense.
Yeah, but okay, that's true.
But like I say, and I mean, there's nothing wrong with being a good, defensive coordinator. I mean, Bud Foster knew his limitations. That's why he stayed there. I think Randy Shannon's starting to realize that's his limitation as well. Now, I did want to push back against a couple of things. Your list of players that you thought should have won the Heisman.
Yep.
Long before Ndamukong Suh, Warren Sapp would have earned it long before him.
Yeah, I kind of put a cutback on the actual year there, but I can't really argue with Warren Sapp. He was absolutely outstanding. And, I think it's just because with Sue, it just seemed like, man, he was just so vicious. And maybe that's why it just sticks out in my head. But you are absolutely right about Warren Sapp.
And as far as Michael Vick, I agree to a point. I'm a Miami Hurricanes fan.
Yeah.
So I still have nightmares about playing Michael Vick.
Yeah. So does a lot of folks.
Didn't he lose to like a 47-year-old Chris Winkie?
A lot of teams lost to a 47-year-old Chris Winkie. And in fairness, Chris Winkie had a lot of good players over there. Peter Warwick was absurd for Florida State. So when you have those kind of toys to play with, you can definitely do a lot, even though you are a geriatric.
Oh, I mean, no doubt about that. But, I mean, even just comparing their numbers, you take the rush yards away and compare them as quarterback, Chris Winkie was a better quarterback.
Yeah, but Vic gave you that other element of, hey, I can run around with my feet. And I think that's something that I think it's because he was kind of a trailblazer on that effort. You know what I'm saying? He was able to get so many yards through the air and more on the ground.
Right. Now, I'll say this. I do think it should go to an outstanding player. And there are a lot of Miami fans mad that Ken Dorsey didn't win it. I don't think Ken Dorsey was a very good quarterback. I think Ken Dorsey was a product of an overabundance of talent around him.
That's a good point, too. He had a lot of guys that played with him that were outstanding. So, and I think that's a lot with quarterbacks, too. You look at Kyle Trask. He was a heck of a lot different quarterback when he didn't have Kyle Pitts to throw the ball to. So a lot of it has to do with your supporting cast, in my opinion, as well.
And I think that's got a big part to do with Mac Jones' success, just my opinion.
Yeah, and that's why I think that Trevor Lawrence is going to finish third. I think Jones will finish second, and then it should go to Devontae Smith. That's just
I agree.
My opinion on that. And I know Clemson fans around here in Columbia are going to be angry with me for that. But what those guys in Alabama were doing, they are outstanding, in my opinion.
I agree. It should be Devontae Smith. And I'm also, like you said earlier, when you threw Sue in there, I don't have a problem throwing a defensive player in there. There are a few defensive players over the years that I might put up for that. Just to throw, a homer pick, but a Miami guy, I would have thrown Ed Reed into that conversation because he changed the way safety was played when he was in college.
He could cover a lot of ground. and his speed and his ability to, I don't think I've ever seen Ed Reed miss a tackle. I know that sounds like I'm being over the top with it, but he was just so pure when it came to that. And that's something that, especially now, a lot of players just don't do anymore. The ability of, hey, if you make a catch, you're not going any further. He could lock guys down in a nanosecond if he couldn't break up the pass.
Oh, absolutely. And I mean, to me, the case kind of rests with him at the fact of how good Sean Taylor was, and he wasn't good enough to take Ed Reed's spot.
Yeah. Well, you're right about that. I wish defensive players could get more into it, but until they start looking at those players, the Heisman Trophy to me is just a joke, an absolute joke.
It's been that way to me for a while. I mean, you get the occasional sprinkling of a Mark Ingram or somebody like that, but let's just be honest, it's a quarterback award.
Yeah, it is. You're absolutely right, but they should change the name of it then. We're going to give it to the best quarterback. Then we'd know. Okay.
Yeah.
If you're a great defensive player, this award's not for you. If you're a great wide receiver, this award's not for you. It should be, I think it's a quarterback running back award, in my opinion. And that they'd rather give it to quarterbacks overall. Running backs are like, when you go home and your wife tells you, hey, we're going to have a steak dinner, but then she says, hey, I went to the store, they didn't have any steak, here's some chicken. The chicken will be great, but you want that steak. And I think that's how they feel about with the Heisman Trophy. They want to give it to that quarterback every time if they can.
Yeah, or at the very least, you could even make the argument that sometimes it's more or less an MVP award, which, I can make some cases for some defensive guys there too, or even special teams guys, because you're not talking a more valuable game-changing kind of player than Devin Hester.
That's true too. We talked about a lot of Miami players, but you're right. You're right about Devin Hester.
I'm a homer.
Yep. Completely agree with you, man.
Yeah, well, I'm just using them as examples because somebody fresh off my mind. Mm-hmm. But I'm sure you can find somebody from Clemson, somebody from South Carolina, somebody from, just about anywhere.
Just about anywhere.
On any given year.
Yeah, you're right about that. Hey, man, I appreciate you joining the show, man. Be sure to tune in every day at 3 o'clock. We appreciate you, buddy.
Yeah, boss. I catch you online when I can.
All right, man. Thank you so much, man. It means a lot.
Yes, sir.
All right, there we go. All right, so really quick here. I told Nate that I would give him my thing on Jim Harbaugh. I think Jim Harbaugh is worn out in college. I don't think they want him at Michigan. I think there's a lot of smoke, and there may be some fire that he's going to head back to the NFL. So I don't know where he'll end up. Wouldn't it be interesting, though, if he ended up at Detroit, who's looking for a coach? Just saying. That could be in the mix. By the way, if Eric Bieniemy is not hired by someone, that is an absolute crying shame, especially with what he's done with that the Kansas City Chiefs offense. I know a lot of it's the players that they have, but he has got them humming. I know that he's been interviewed for several different jobs. Somebody needs to hire Eric Bieniemy. He's a better hire, in my opinion, than Urban Meyer. At least with Eric Bieniemy, he's had some success at the NFL level. Urban Meyer has, let's be honest, quit on the last two teams that he's had, and he's wanting $12 million to coach the Jacksonville Jaguars. What? You're out of your mind, Urban Meyer. I'm telling you, the name to get if you're in the NFL right now is Eric Bieniemy. And I hope that someone will take the chance on him over going with Urban Meyer, who, let's be honest, is towards the end of his career. Especially at the $12 million price tag. What has he done in the NFL that's worthy of $12 million? But you know who'll pay him? Jacksonville Jaguars. Why? Because their ownership doesn't know much about the game of hut-hut. If you don't believe me, look at the decisions that they've made. They are right now a gong show of a franchise. And I know there were a lot of Clemson fans that were like, oh, this is great. I will love to see Trevor Lawrence go to Jacksonville over going to the Jets. Look, both are terrible, but the Jacksonville Jaguars are really bad. Really bad. It's going to end up like Deshaun Watson with the Texans. Led the league in passing, sitting home for the playoffs. All right, tomorrow on the Rundown, we'll have more for you. All kinds of great stuff. We'll keep up with the coaching carousel. I'm on Twitter at RobSoundsGood. Be sure to follow me there, and we will see you tomorrow. Hey, thank you guys for checking out the show, man. We're here every day at 3 o'clock. you're welcome to chime in, welcome to call in. I appreciate you guys taking some time out. Thanks to Carolina Jackpot, let me stream my show here. And you guys are awesome over there on YouTube. So thanks so much, and we'll see you guys later on.